I'm Chase Jenkins. I own and operate Talon Defense. It's primarily law enforcement, military, and vetted civilian training company. I spent 25 years in law enforcement. Got in law enforcement in '92 when I was young. It's about the only job I've ever had or known, right? I was real lucky when I first got into it that I was surrounded by some good guys. I spent a lot of time with my mouth closed, my ears open, and learned as much as I could from those guys. The first several years I worked with a unit that patrolled basically the projects, our public housing, the department I worked for. It was a fun several years. It was a busy several years, right? A lot of what I did learn and some of the training that we do came from those specific years in the job. So it was a fast-paced unit. It was a progressive unit. We were lucky that we had training offered and afforded to us that some of the other folks didn't get, so we became a training junkie, right? I say we, like several guys in the unit did. I in particular sought training out. If it was a class I could get into somehow or another, I managed to weasel my way into it. I learned early on that, hey man, there's a lot of stuff I don't know, right? So I want to learn it all. If it was a particular tactic or piece of equipment that we were using, we would actually seek out the instructor part of that, not to be the instructor, but to get as much information behind the tactic or the product, whatever it was that we were using. We just wanted to know everything about it, and I was one of those guys. I wanted as much information behind as I could get. So as the career grew, got into robbery, homicide, spent some time in investigations, worked alongside of narcotics and some of the patrol functions that we did. So just really got a taste of every aspect of the job. I was lucky in that aspect. A lot of folks don't get that, right? So, you know, the frame of reference widened, the experience grew. So that was one of the things I felt like was that I really enjoyed, was just working the different aspects of the job and all the knowledge that came along with that. Those are some of the pluses, just the friendship, the camaraderie, and doing that job, right? I mean, it's not for everybody. Not everybody that's doing it does a good job at it. But I think that it was something I wouldn't go back and change for anything. It was all I could ever really see me doing. And like I said, for the first several years, I couldn't tell you how much. I didn't ever think about how much money I made or what the benefits were, you know, until you got married and had a family and folks you're responsible for. But it was a good career. I wouldn't change it for anything. Here's the deal: if you commit to anything 100%, it's gonna take time. You always want to have to find that balance between the important things, the family, the events, the birthdays, holidays, you know, just the routine events, baseball games, stuff like that. And you're going to miss some of that stuff. I think as I developed a family, that was some of the stuff that bothered me the most. You know, I can't tell you how many sporting events I had to get up and leave in the middle of, or you know, how many Christmases you know, you were at work while they were opening presents. I was never an overnight guy, right? I hated the overnight work part of it, which luckily I didn't have to do too awful much of that. And just, you know, like I said, just seeing, I mean, I grew up in a community, in an area where I didn't even know people were actually capable of doing the things they did to each other until I got into law enforcement. And so I think it does, to an extent, jade you toward everybody else. You and I have had this conversation before, you know, that you know, I kind of look at everybody until they prove they're a good person or whatever. I had got very jaded toward the public, right? I mean, there was about 5 good people on the face of this earth. I was one of them, and I knew the other 4. And I think the big thing that getting into training, especially the open enrollment classes, did for me, and I've been telling people this for years, is the folks that showed up to those classes, I started seeing, hey man, you know what? There's still a lot of good people, you know, out there in public, right? So I think that that's the bad part, is just seeing people and the mindset of some folks. And what they're capable of doing to other people for nothing. And then actually toward the end of the career, being in a position where I was able to come back around and say, hey man, you know what, there's a lot of good people out there. So that's the bad part and the good part of what it did for me, I think. Well, you know, I like any type of really outdoor stuff, right? I grew up in a setting like not unlike this one. I like to hunt. I grew up hunting with my dad and some of my uncles. Quail hunting was a big thing for us.
A bird hunter.
Yeah, and I still love to do that. Of course, time, right? I mean, when you start running a business, you know, hey, everybody, hey, start your own business. They said it'll be fun. They said, well, I'm waiting on the fun part of it, right? Once you start doing anything, I think, you know, as a job, it takes on a different aspect. So there's not that much quote unquote free time. But I do like to hunt. I like to shoot, just go to the range and shoot where there's no questions being asked, or, you know, just some time with myself. My son's 11 now. He's old enough that we can get out and do some of that stuff. We've been talking about camping some this summer. That's something I kind of always enjoyed doing, just really hadn't had the opportunity to. So hopefully I'll be able to start getting back into some of that. Anything that he's doing, you know, baseball, football, just to go watch kids at that age, have a good time. I could do that all day. I have helped coach some of his teams. That's something I enjoy, you know, just spending time with the kids. Of course, everything's got an upside, got a downside, right? So the parents nowadays will come in and spoil some of that. You know, you just try to tune all that stuff out. But you know, every little Johnny on the field is the next you know, Dallas Cowboy superstar. But that's the kind of stuff I like doing. Just really anything outside, anything that revolves around shooting or hunting or just spending time, you know, outside with Talon or some of my buddies is how I like to spend my free time when I have some. All right, so I started Talon Defense in around 2009. How it started was in law enforcement. As we started getting a lot of training, started getting tagged with responsibilities that we weren't always looking for, right? Started doing some in-service instruction, you know, instructing during in-service training. If you've ever been around that, you want to be as far away from it as you can get, right? If there's 20 cops that has to be at that event inside the room, there's maybe 2 that want to be there. It's not a pleasant experience for anybody involved, and the training suffers, I think, a lot of times because of that, right? So did that for a couple of years, and then we kind of started getting into some training guys outside the department, right? Had a lot of military guys coming in that were needing training that wasn't getting it. If you'll think back to about those times, you know, we were involved in several conflicts. You had a lot of guys deploying that were kind of honest, like, hey, our skills, my skills, the unit skills are not where they need to be. Can you run us through a course on the weekend? Can you run me and a couple of my friends through, or you know, even a more setting where you had a whole unit there. So we started doing some stuff like that. I started working with Tiger McKee at Shoot Right as well. I'd been through a lot of Tiger's classes and started assisting him on the range a little bit. Tiger was probably one of my first quote unquote mentors. I had attended a class with him. Lord, I can't even tell you when it was. I mean, years back, right? And man, I learned more. I mean, I was already a shooter, but I learned more in that class than I ever had before, as far as, you know, fundamentals and how to employ them and what they were. So yeah, he was close by. I trained with him a lot. I lost track of the amount of classes I took with him. I worked on the range a little bit with him. I started doing some stuff on my own at that time too. The first time somebody mentioned to me, hey man, you need to be charging for these classes, I mean, I kind of giggled about it. You know, I was like, man, there's no way. I mean, you're talking about the era, you know, Tiger, Clint Smith, Pat Rogers, folks like that. And I was like, there's no way anybody will ever, you know, pay to come take a class of mine, and plus I don't have the time. So it was actually something that just kind of happened by accident. We got kind of formal about it in 09, and it just kind of grew from there. I saw the potential in it. It was something I actually started enjoying doing, you know, versus like in-service training. You had 20 people show up to class, they all 20 wanted to be there, man. You could just get a lot of stuff done. You know, the atmosphere was different, the attitude was completely different. Those guys wanted the training, they'd sought it out, so you could accomplish twice as much in an open class like that as you could something that was, you know, department mandated. So it just kind of started growing from there. With me, like I said earlier, it was a chance to be around other good people, like-minded stuff. You're all doing something you enjoy. It was a good way to spend the day, right? I mean, any day out of the office, outside on a day like this was a plus. So it was just fun. My classes, I kind of run like this, right? Don't take yourself too serious, right? Don't believe your own press. So that's kind of the mindset that I go into it with. I think we try to make it fun, right? Try to make it a good event. If if you're laughing, you got open mind and you're learning. So that's one of the big things. I want a guy to come to class and enjoy the time that he spends there. We also want him to learn. So if we can get a laid back atmosphere where we're not taking ourselves too serious, I think that helps a lot, right? So we have people say that's the kind of feedback that we get. I always like to hear. It's like, hey man, I came out, I mean, one, it was a great day. I mean, we laughed and cut up, but I learned a lot too and met some other good people. That's the other thing. We have a lot of repeat customers. That's important to me. I think if they obviously wasn't enjoying it, they wouldn't come back, I guess, right? So that's kind of important to me. But the friendships that's made, you see these guys show up at classes. They're from different states or whatever. They get together and actually plan to come to the same class so they can spend time together. So I think just creating those friendships and seeing those guys enjoy, other like-minded people that they've met at class and doing things. I mean, just hearing from them or following them. You see where they're getting together and doing other stuff. Hunting, camping. So I think just the experience, the whole thing, not just showing up to a class, but just the whole concept of it is what I have enjoyed the most out of it. I think some of the things that we do different, like I said, we have those basic shooting classes, right? Handgun and carbine, shotgun. But what I got into earlier on was bred from the job, right? The vehicle classes. We were one of the first training groups, I think, that was actually offering a structured vehicle class and the techniques and tactics behind that. So that was one of the things that we started, I think, kind of got us known out there was running the vehicle defense classes. Shooting in and around vehicles, into them, out of them, how cars and bullets react and respond to each other in a structured type training event. The positional work, right? The unorthodox type training, not just standing on a flat range and shooting a target that's not moving, you're not moving, there's very little stress involved at all. We didn't train unless it was a nice, pretty sunny day. All of that stuff was skewed from where I was coming from in law enforcement. So started looking at it, and Tiger was one of the first guys that introduced us to it, is the mental aspect of it, right? Shooting is like 95% mental and about somewhere between 5 and 10% mechanics, right? It's a thinking man's game. It's problem solving at high speed. It's, like I said, it's not just shooting. We started trying to create a thinking fighter as opposed to just a guy that was shooting. You can take a thinker and create a fighter and not necessarily the other way around. Some of the first things that we started looking at when we bought into the mental aspect of shooting is, hey man, it's skewed. I mean, there's some huge issues here. The first thing that dawned on us was we would just take a guy that had never been a safety issue on the range. But this particular individual, every time you were in a situation on the street and he showed up, she showed up, they showed up, now you had two problems. It's like, hey, one, why is that happening? And two, what can we do to correct it, right? Because I can't just say, well, he just ain't ever going to quite get there. He's showing up to back me up. I need him to be there, right? 100%. And I don't need it to be his 100%. I need it to be an actual 100%. So we started looking at training from the mental aspect. What were we doing wrong? And man, right off the bat, it was the safety issue with it. We were creating a very sterile, safe environment for this guy to come and shoot in, perform in. So we were paying lip service to safety, right? We just rattled off these four safety issues and didn't ever require them to do that. So that was the first aspect. Look, this individual is a problem on the cause because he's not safe with a weapon. He'll never be safe with that weapon until we require him to perform those things in a training environment. So we started setting out, and I tell people this all the time, and a lot of times certain people's eyes get real big, right? It's like, I'm not going to create a safe environment for you out here today. Now the point behind that is we're going to have a semi-safe environment. We're not going to get out and just do something dangerous for the sake of doing something dangerous. But what we're going to do is require you to be safe with the gun. That way the environment doesn't matter. So you don't leave thinking, hey, I did good today, right? Because I set up a safe environment for you. We actually made you perform safely in what environment was given to you. So you did learn something, right? You did learn how to be safe with that gun. And there's ways we can do that without being dangerous. And in the shooting aspect of it, we're problem solving with a firearm, right? That's all it is. So we know right off the bat, we've got to be safe, regardless, right? We've got to be deadly. We've got to make decisions, and they can't just be a decision, it has to be the right decision. So if we're not allowing them to think, create a thought process, and perform under stress while having to think through the problem and solve it correctly, then what are we doing, right? I mean, I can take a 6-year-old out and get them to hit a target 25 yards away, sure, with no stress. So that's not the case. In law enforcement, as a citizen carrying a gun in the military, that's not the case. Well, Pat Rogers taught me this, and it was one of the things that kind of stuck with me from the early days of training with him, right, is all stress is self-induced. Regardless of what it is, it's what you perceive it to be. So if you're not introducing yourself to stress, if you're not inoculating yourself to it, then anything can easily stress you out. So the shooting aspect of it, you know, is just as easy to come up with stress as performing in front of your other peers on the line. A lot of times that's a stressor for certain individuals. Pulling the little pack timer out, that's another stressor, right? Making you use sterile application of the fundamentals while under stress is what we're looking for. So I want you to be able to run the gun under stress, duress, unconventional positions, and an austere environment. So a lot of times our training provides all of that, right? This is the first sunny day I've had in about 14 days where I wasn't actually not only on the range and it raining, but wading in water. So we don't cancel training for that type of environment, right? And a lot of times it's just value added. If you can problem solve, come up with the right decision, apply the fundamentals of shooting under all those stressors, now we're getting somewhere, right? And that's what you're required to do on the street. But Kurt kind of came up with an idea. I had told myself, look, man, here's what I want to be able to do, right? So the early days, what he did was take a cardboard 20 round ammo box, and he taped it to a stick, right? And he would hold that out there at the ejection port, and it would cause malfunction. But the thing about it is cardboard, it didn't last that long, so we spent a lot of times taping these things to sticks, right? We could use the little 2x2 wood uprights. The same kind of issue with those, we were kind of getting one type of malfunction. So he got with a friend of his, John Baggett, who's also a shooter that was bending Kydex at the time. They got together and talked about, hey, here's what we want, here's what I think it needs to look like. We went through several evolutions of it, right? But what we liked about that is it allowed us to do a lot of different things. We used an arrow shaft for the handle portion of it for a long time. That would allow us to get some failure to fires on like the single action guns or the SIGs. We could get that stick in behind the hammer, so at least we'd get a failure to fire and work from that standpoint. We could hold the pawn another way behind like the Glocks and the Springfields, and we could actually get another type of malfunction with that. Depending on the angle that you held it to on the carbine, we could actually kind of control the malfunction you were getting, right?
So you get type 1, type 2, type
right,
3.
Right, and we could, or take that stick, go around to the opposite side of the carbine, and we give you a bolt lock. We could, after we knew you'd fired so many rounds, we could hit the mag release, drop the mag just a little bit, so you actually get a type 1, type 2, or type 3. We were getting real close to actually being able to give you the malfunction that we wanted you to get. The deal with malfunctions, Troy, was we had this going on, right? We usually did malfunction work toward the end of training, because look, we had to go back every training day and build back up right on the fundamentals. So we always did it toward the end of training. Folks were tired, right? It was beer 30, it was time to go. We were hot or cold or miserable. You knew exactly what type of malfunction you was fixing to get, right? Because you were setting it up. So if you wasn't really on your game as an instructor, and you need to understand it's the end of the day for you too, so you was getting ready to go, right? They knew it was a type 1, right?
Type 1's coming.
So they just throw the gun up there. A lot of times they wouldn't even press the trigger, right? They wouldn't seat the magazine. They knew the answer was rack the slide, go to work. Same thing with the 2 and the 3, right? So we weren't learning how to properly clear those malfunctions. Now we can still see that today, right? You get to class, everybody's like, hey man, we're locked in on malfunction reduction until the PAL comes out. And then you see, no, I'm not, right? You see all type of aborted attempts to get this gun up and working. So that was showing us that, hey, you know, we're not where we need to be on malfunctions. Now, my deal on malfunctions, folks, hey, you spend a lot of time on that or whatever in certain classes we do. Why we need to be working on shooting. Here's the deal. You know as well as I did a couple years ago, we went through some horrendous QC on ammo, right? And we're still seeing that on the range today. I mean, anything that can be wrong with ammo is, right? No primer, no flash hole drill, primer seated backwards, sideways, not installed at all, no powder in it, bullet seated backwards. I mean, you know, you're seeing everything, right? You need to know what causes that malfunction, to know how to clear it. There's a lot of errant stuff out there on the internet about how to clear some of these malfunctions. Somebody had sent me a video a couple weeks ago that was hard to watch because the guy's teaching how to clear a malfunction in a certain way, and you just want to yell at him. I was like, hey dude, if that's an actual malfunction and not one you just created, the way you're trying to do that is not going to work, right? I mean, you need to understand, we're setting up a false malfunction with a perfectly working gun and perfect ammo it's going to clear. Right? Some of these malfunctions are caused because the gun's broke or we got faulty ammo. It's not going to clear in reality the way it does on the range. So what the PAW was letting us do is get those malfunctions under full power. We were actually able to see some of that come to light, right? Like, hey, this doesn't clear the way I've always been shown, or if I don't follow each step precisely, I don't get the result I need. So I'm kind of glad that we saw the need for that. I'm kind of glad that, you know, Kurt's one of those guys that his mind works better than mine, right? So those little nuances, he can sit down and kind of figure those things out.
So he invented it and you kind of maybe borrowed what he was doing and took it to the next level.
Yeah, when he sat down and started designing that and coming out with the PAW, we ran that in classes for a long, long time. Now here's the deal, as much as I'm traveling now, I got enough stuff to drag all over the world, so I'm kind of back to using the 2x2 or something like that if I have it, but I've still got a little array of those things, you know, as we progressed with them through the years hanging up that I don't want to use, you know, break them, tear them up or anything. I think I've got 4 of them up there, but yeah, I was always kind of happy with the evolution of how that worked. So the TACMed stuff, met Hugh Coffey several years ago. Hugh's a retired medic out of the metro Atlanta area. If you've never met him, you're doing yourself a disservice, right? Just a genuine, good, salt-of-the-earth guy. Very knowledgeable, right? Working in the area he worked in, the amount of time he did, he's seen a little bit of trauma. Several years ago, put a class together. I did the shooting end of it. Hugh did the med work end of it. It's progressed into what you see today, right? On the firearm side, I run my injured shooter stuff, depending on if it's the 2-day or 4-day. We run handgun only in the 2-day. I get into carbine work and low light in the 4-day. Hugh gets into basic trauma in the 2-day and gets into some prolonged field care in the 4-day. We put those two things together during the class. If you'll look at UCR stats, if you look at videos, it's just like a knife fight, right? First rule is you're gonna get cut, right? Second rule is have a knife. Same thing with guns, right? Have a gun, 2 people shooting at each other, you're probably gonna get shot. You look at Sims work, 2 guys shooting at each other, get tagged. So think about it this way, it's like, hey man, if I know I'm gonna get shot, there's a lot of time that can go by that's very important where my life can slip away, right? From the minute that injury happens, if it's severe enough, we're slowly starting to die. So we need to slow that process till we can get somewhere where they can actually stop it. So that's what we started putting together in those classes. I think we've got a unique product, right? It's just like with anything else. If you look at the car classes that we were doing early on, right? I mean, that, man, all of a sudden, that just started growing, right? I mean, everybody started running a car class. Now. It's the same thing with this med class, right? I didn't really see anybody doing it on the level we were doing it, and now it's kind of starting to be a thing. Some other guys out there that I see that's doing stuff that I like. Of course, we have a loose alliance with Jay Paisley over at Crisis Application Group. I think from what I can see, they've got a good product, right? But to me, what I liked about the med stuff, I avoided it for years because I thought, you know what, I'm not a paramedic, I'm not a EMT. And then it kind of dawned on me one day, it's like, wait a minute, firemen are doing this, how hard can it be, right? so that was that jab to the boys in red, right? America's best second responders. But I was like, hey man, look, it's pretty simple. We need to be kind of doing some of this, especially on the street level, right? But what I started seeing was, hey, one, there's a chance I'm going to use this med stuff before I ever used the gun stuff. It was kind of comforting to me to know that, like, hey, if I'm in a car wreck with my family or whatever, I can fix a lot of stuff now with a tourniquet and some gauze. Simple life-saving stuff that, you know, that you just didn't have before the class. So I fell in love with it just because of that. But I think for the cop on the street, if we're making holes, we need to be able to fix holes, you know, on our partners, on ourselves, on the public, and the bad guy if need be. And it's simple. After I saw how simple it was, I'm like, why are we not doing this nationwide across the board? You know, save your life with a tourniquet versus not having one. Right. So that's probably my favorite class right now. Anytime I can work with Hugh, you know, it is a bonus. But I think that's probably the most relevant, realistic class that we're putting out right now. Allison Platt Creative did the website for us. Was real happy with it. It's simple, easy to follow, easy to use, everything we needed, right? It's at talondefense.us.com. It's got the schedule up there. We're still adding some stuff. The payment process is simple and up there. So the registration process is streamlined and easy for you and for me, which was important. And as we keep adding classes, one of the things I like, she put a map up there, so depending on where you're at, you can see where we're offering a class at. Click on that, go through the registration process. The course information is up there. So I really like the looks of it, and like I said, she's still kind of refining it and working on it, but I've been real happy with it. Well, when you take a class with us, depending on which one you take, right, the common traits you're always going to get is one, we're going to be courteous, right, professional. We're going to create a learning environment for you. We're going to make sure that you're safe with that gun, regardless of which class it is. We're going to have a good time, we're going to laugh, and we're going to learn.